Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us. My name is Mark Norquist. This is Brian Merkel.
Hello.
And what we're going to try to do tonight is break down a large animal for you pretty real time in about an hour, which is a pretty big challenge. We've been working a lot today. You probably see in the background here several friends who are part of the Hunters Club here in Minnesota. We got Eric, Rennell, and Alex, and then behind the scenes is Matt. And we are doing this in my garage. The reason we're doing this in my garage is that's where you're going to be butchering a deer. And so this is a very realistic scenario that we're setting up for you today.
And it's great, just meat refrigerating temperature.
That it is. So we have actually two deer here. And what we're doing is we've been breaking down one of them today so that we've got pre-cut pieces that we can show you what some really end product would look like. And then we're going to be going through the process of butchering this other deer we have here. From a very high level, what we'll do is we're going to skin this deer. We're going to break it down into its primals. And then we're going to show you how to get really the nice cuts that you're going to want. You know, Brian and I were talking about this earlier today. I think a lot of people who are new to deer hunting, a lot of it's just sort of general. You're just sort of cutting it, right?
Right. And I've been in retail butchery and whole animal butchery for 10 years now, and there's no substitution for being able to just get reps in when you're butchering things. And for most hunters, you're not getting that many reps in. You know, hopefully you're getting one or two a year in, but the purpose of this tonight is to provide a sense of order and help you butcher things a little bit more efficiently at home.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go through a lot of this. Again, like I said, this is going to be a challenge. We're going to be running through some things probably faster than you would like ideally. Other things might be going a little bit slow, and we're trying to pace it all so that it keeps you engaged and you're able to learn about it. So we've got two cameras going. What's going to happen is I'm going to ask Brian questions. Brian's going to be doing the majority of the cutting. I'm going to then sometimes grab the second camera so we can do close-ups on that. And then you'll see the other guys coming in and out as we go through the process.
Great.
The one thing that's pretty exciting about tonight is we've got well over 100 people on the clinic here online. Everywhere from Maryland to Virginia, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Missouri, South Carolina, Nebraska, Michigan, Arizona, Washington, D.C. Here's the interesting one, Budapest. Somebody from Budapest is supposedly on. So I don't know what time it is there, but hopefully they're enjoying this. So with that, you know, one of the things I want to talk about right before we jump into this is safety. And that's both in terms of making sure you're careful when you are using knives, using cleavers, axes, anything like that. But also, if anyone's around you, making sure you're aware of everyone's space. But there are other things to consider too. So we are butchering tonight a white-tailed deer. And if you're not familiar with chronic wasting disease, or CWD as it's called, you should look into this to understand what it is about. These deer are not from a CWD zone, so there should not be a risk of the prion disease being in them. But it's something you should know about, because there are risks associated with when you're cutting into the head and spine of these deer. Matt, any comments? Everybody able to hopefully see everything?
It seems that way, yeah.
Okay, great. If you do have a question, punch it into the Q&A section. And then also, if you're having any issues, you can't see something, just let Matt know and he'll shout it out to us. So before we get into it, let's just quick talk about equipment. What do you like to have for basic equipment setup for butchering?
Well, if it's really cold, it's nice to have gloves, because you can definitely cut into your hand, and if it's numb, you might not even notice or forget that it's there in the way of your blade. I like to wear like tight fitting gloves And then rubber gloves oftentimes just to be able to keep things clean. And I also have to use these for cross-country skiing and packing meat boxes and stuff. So I'm gonna try to keep my gloves clean. I like having rubber gloves. I like keep a few towels handy, a bench scraper.
It's the same as basically bench scrapers, like a baker's thing, huh?
Right. It's just deer fat is cold and waxy, and be able to just keep your workspace clean. Your favorite boning knife? I prefer like a 5-inch stiff blade. I'm a retail butcher. I think many folks prefer something a little bit smaller that's more like hunting oriented. And then something I really enjoy using when butchering venison is a good saw. You could use any basic small, like 12, 14-inch saw. You don't have to find like an amazing vintage butcher saw that's a custom 27.5 inches long. But if you do, like, congratulations, your saw is as cool as mine. And that's about all I would say for basic tools.
Yeah, for basic tools, I think some of the things that I like on top of it, we've got a phenomenal cutting board here that you brought. We've got some other big ones over there. One of the things that I like obsess about now is getting the right height to the table, because I have butchered too many times where I'm bent over. And if you're doing that for several hours, you're going to have a very sore back.
Yeah, to that end, gravity should be your tool, not your enemy. And that's why we have this deer hanging here rather than laid out on the table.
Matt, can you turn it just to the camera just to see the gambrel up there? So we're hanging this deer. If you're not familiar with gambrel, this is gonna, you're gonna be able to hang on from the hind legs. This one has a pulley system with the rope coming off, which makes it a lot easier to get it hoisted up. And as Brian said, let gravity be your benefit.
Right. Use it for your benefit. I'd like to point out one other tip that I like to do when butchering in the field. And if you can find a branch that's parallel to the ground, using 2 ratchet straps and going through each shank and connecting it in 2 different locations will keep your deer from spinning while you're trying to butcher it. Luckily here, we've got helpers to help hold things steady, but what I prefer when butchering deer by myself would be to have 2 separate anchors holding the deer up. Do we take the skin off?
Let's take the skin off.
Right.
So I'm going to jump over on the second camera here. Alex, if you could help hold. And I'll try to narrate some, and Brian will talk through some.
Right. So I have opened things up to hopefully make this process a little bit easier while we're doing live. Gone all along the edge of the diaphragm and opened up the hide. I've carefully gone around the shank, paying very close attention not to cut through the tendon that is supporting the gambrel. Then down below, I've also cut from the inside of the shank, the foreshank bone. You can feel it underneath the hide, and you can just run your knife straight along that bone and not have to worry about all this finesse of getting the hide off there. And then you just slowly open it up so you can peel it back. Speaking of peel it back, I'm gonna have to trim this guy. And I like to work cutting away from myself and downward, basically. And at any opportunity, if you can use your hand and pull, generally pulling is better than poking with your knife blade, but you will reach a point of fatigue eventually.
And just to let you know what's happened with this deer up to this point. So basically, this deer was field dressed, and obviously eviscerated everything out of its cavity. And then we did a little bit of prep here beforehand. The hoof end of the front shanks, the legs were cut off, and we started skinning a little bit, just getting some of the little bits and pieces done so that we could get this done in time.
All right. like I was saying, once you can open it up with your knife, and you should reach a point where you'll be able to pull the hide rather easily off. I like to pull with my left hand and just use my fist.
Getting your fist or your elbow in or your forearm, I find is, yeah, a really good way to pull down on the skin.
I'll note that the tail is attached here, and it's about half an inch in between the different sections of the tail, and you can poke around with the tip of a knife, and where you find the piece that's like jello, it's a very easy cut to make.
Please do ask questions as we're going along, and then Matt, just shout them out if somebody's got one.
I have one.
Okay, what have you got?
How much hair is currently on the meat? Is there some amount that is unavoidable?
Really good question. You know, and you'll probably notice actually here, you know, I'm gonna come in tight. If you look at I think you could probably see that there. There's a fair amount of hair that's coming off. So the key is, you know, you're gonna want to bring down. You notice how Brian is bringing the hide down with the fur on really the inside of itself. So in this way, it is the best way to keep the hair off of the meat. The reality is you're never going to avoid all of it. There's always going to be some amount of hair that gets on the meat. And what I like to do is clean it off as you're going, if as much as you can. And then in the end, you're still going to have to take some off during the final steps, because again, it's just unavoidable. And like, you know, like we were saying, if you're sticking your elbow in on that skin or your forearm, you're eventually going to get some of that hair on your own body. I've probably got some on my arm here. And so that's just something you have to deal with.
Just to point out the thin muscle that's underneath the hide with our fast twitch muscles, and generally not something I take the time to remove.
So this here,
Yeah, it's all pretty tough.
it's a very thin, if you can see the blade has gone through there on that one spot. It's a very thin cut of meat. You know, if you can get it out, wonderful, but it's definitely a lot of calories expended for a very small bit of meat. All right. So one thing I'll point out also, as you're going through this process, everybody's got a different perspective. If you can, I would recommend saving the hide. Eric, you want to grab some of those tanned hides there and toss them over to me? Yeah, so there's different colors. So like these are different colored hides that I've had tanned, and you can make a lot of cool things out of them. And buckskin or deer skin is a very soft hide that makes great products, whether it's a book cover or a bag or any number of different things. Grab those. Okay, so now we're getting down. Brian's down on the neck, and this is where it definitely, you know, it can be challenging. So these deer, the head was removed. And so, you know, that creates both opportunities and challenges. You know, he's right now down at that point of where we've got there's good neck meat down there that you're going to want to utilize. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep, and I'm gonna stop right here. Not because I'm tired of pulling this hide off, but because I want to show you that it makes it a lot easier to butcher the animal if the hide is weighing it down from the head. So if the head's not on this, but if the hide is draped over the head, it's going to help anchor the deer while you're butchering it. And I think we can stop there for pulling it off and leave that on while we start to break down the rest of it.
Sounds good. So yeah, you're generally going to, again, we're short cycling some of this just to keep things moving, but that's where you're gonna pull the hide off completely, set it aside. Again, if you want to tan it, salt it up and get it prepared to send to a tanner. And then we're gonna work on the deer. So as you can see here, you know, we now at this point have the deer pretty clean, and you can see all the major parts that we're going to go through here. Got the hide at the bottom. So we're going to focus on the front legs or arms first, right, Brian?
Yep. So we're going to remove the shoulder for the scapula, humerus, and foreshank.
Okay. Question, Matt?
Yeah, before we go too far on the hide here, under non-video circumstances, if you harvest and hang a deer, do you prefer to cool the meat with the hide on or off?
I like to cool the animal with the hide on, and I've left a deer with the hide on for over 3 weeks before. I think that there's a benefit to breaking for dry aging the deer with the hide on. It means you're not going to end up with a lot of just dried muscle that is going to end up in the garbage rather than in your trim or as part of your roasts.
These deer were hanging a week.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Brian said. And I've heard a lot of different people say over the years, you know, when the hide is left on and the animal's hanging, that it makes it taste gamier. I guess I haven't experienced that, but
yeah, I'm with you on that, Mark. I'll also say that, and if you have a good dry aging setup, a lot of people are doing that at home now in retrofitted fridges or with like fancy refrigerators. And I've done that with venison. If you're able to butcher the venison legs and you are confident that there isn't blood sitting in the arteries and there isn't joint fluid, I've dry aged venison legs up to 80 days and found the texture and flavor to be quite enjoyable personally. I think for people who don't like venison, they really don't like it once it's been hung around for 80 days. All right.
okay.
So we're going to take these shoulders off now.
See if we can maybe turn a little bit. Can you turn it actually this way, Alex? Can you spin it? There you go, right like that. There we go.
So with these shoulders, the shank, humerus, and the scapula, or the shoulder blade, they are not attached to any other bones, and it makes this a pretty easy thing to remove. This part of meat here would be like the brisket, or sort of the belly, and that's going to stay on the carcass. But you can really poke around with your hands and just feel how this wants to come off on its own. Bit of a bloody surprise in there.
So some damaged meat up in there.
Yep.
But like Brian said, you know, right up that scapula bone. I got that right, I think, didn't I?
Yep.
And
so you can hear this scapula there, and this is something that is rather intuitive. Once you're holding onto this leg, it's very easy to understand where it's supposed to come off.
I agree. I think it is probably the easiest cut to make. That just seems natural and appropriate. Okay.
And let's just do that again. So have another example. I'm gonna turn it. You can hold the like that. Right. folks. Okay. Well, we've got our shoulders off, and
Let's see.
we'll bring one from the shoulder that was already with this one.
So as we're looking for, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take one of the shoulders now and work with it. But, so, and skin off, front arm's gone, which is, pretty clean.
I'm not going to completely break down this this shoulder, but one thing I want to show folks is an easy way to remove the scapula. I find that a lot of people spend a lot of time dangerously navigating the scapula, and if you to remove it this way, it's usually safer and a cleaner way to remove it, as well as if you're trying to pack something out in the field. It's a pretty easy thing to do, be able to remove that bone weight from your pack. So like I said, there's the shank, the humerus, and then the scapula here. You can feel just with a finger where that joint is. And since I've done this a lot, I know exactly where it is. But you can search for it with the tip of your knife, but there's a really clean joint there. And
Can you show that again?
Yep.
Let's open it. Let's just go close here. Okay, look at that ball joint in there. Yep, there we go. Okay.
Once I've opened that up, you can feel where the edge of the scapula is. And I like to make a cut up here and then just follow that meat down from the top side of it. And I'll scrape with my knife and open up. And follow the bone around. As you open it up, you can start to pull the scapula up a little bit, and you're going to move your knife around the joint there and open it up on this side. There's a notch underneath here, a piece of bone that you want to navigate around with the tip of your knife and sort of open up the scapula more. Here's a good view here. And never cut towards your hand, but I'm going to do it just so you can get a better look at this. We're cut on the bottom side. That's going to help open things up for you. You'll be able to get a good grip. Pull it out.
It's like a canoe paddle blade.
Yep. As you're doing that, you can see that there's some tough parts in Silverskin, and I'll just nick that out. And you end up with something that's pretty darn clean, and there's a lot less bone weight. What we're left here are a couple different cuts, some great steaks if this was big beef, but this would be what the flat iron is. And the muscle that's underneath the scapula, and the chuck tender, just commonly called the shoulder. I like to remove the humerus bone, where you go from the inside and just follow it along the bone on the inside of that bone, and then slowly open it up. And you can use this for your grind, for sausage. You can trim it out, and you'll get a couple pieces here that would be suitable for jerky, for something with pretty much zero Silverskin. Just kind of depends on how much work you want to put in cleaning up this part of the animal. We're going to talk more about shanks as we get a little bit farther through, but we're going to keep moving.
Sounds good. Okay, so next we're gonna, move down to the flanks and the ribs. But Matt, I think you said there's a couple questions.
Yeah, you were just talking about Silverskin. What are some of the techniques for removing Silverskin? He says, why does it look so easy for professionals, but so hard for him?
Yeah, it's well, when you just do it every day for years and years, it becomes pretty easy. If I think of it like filleting fish, I recommend using a longer knife. Oh, can you hand me my shanky butcher's knife? Thanks. My favorite knife for removing Silverskin is something that's a really sharp and long blade. And so you can hold the Silverskin and then make long strokes removing it. But it's a time-consuming process. There's no way to get around that.
Since we're talking knives, I'll real quick, while we're getting ready to set up this next one, make sure you guys see this Jeb Taylor knife. Jeb was gonna join us tonight, but he couldn't, he wasn't able to drive up from Rochester. I think from the standpoint, in my opinion, the Silverskin, the key is having a good knife. This knife here, which you can register to win. I think it goes through next week, right, Matt?
Yep.
If you just go, we'll send a link out at the end, or Matt, you can put it in there. But I think a good knife like this boning knife is the critical key to making sure you get that Silverskin off.
Yep. All right.
Another question about Silverskin. How much Silverskin / connective tissue should be trimmed for grinding? How much is okay to leave in?
Well, I could talk about the nuances of grinding meat for many, many hours. But I recommend removing what you can. For Silverskin that feels really thick and tough, remove that. But you don't need to remove any like all Silverskin. And if you sharpen your grinding blades, you should be able to do a pretty good job grinding that. And I think it's worth taking the tougher meat from like the neck and shoulders and using that as like a coarse grind for chili or stew meat versus what you might use for a sausage or something.
You know, I'll just add one element there, and let's make sure we show them throughout. Two different types of material you're going to find. You're going to have Silverskin and then tallow or the deer fat. The Silverskin is going to be tough, but it isn't going to be like the tallow,
Right.
which you want to get all the tallow out.
Yep.
Get as much Silverskin as you can, but definitely all the tallow.
Yeah, there's not a lot of folks out there that love the taste and smell of warm deer fat. But the Silverskin is just going to add a gelatinous quality to something you're going to cook for a long time. Or if it's ground finely enough, you're not going to notice it.
Yep. Okay, jump back on the other. Alex, maybe help hold.
Yep. So I'm going to remove the what I call the flank and take the spare ribs off. A lot of people have started smoking their venison ribs, and I think that's awesome. It's something I really enjoy, and smoke and barbecue flavors can like really compete against like a pretty gamey part of the animal. You can see that this part here is hanging on the inside of the leg. It attaches into the center, and this part would be considered the flank. I like to just open that up, and I'm looking at, we know that the back straps are running on the opposite side here. You don't want to cut too close to the spine. I like to pretty much just go straight down like this. In an easy way. If you have a saw, this is a great way to use gravity in your favor and just slowly go through each rib. And we'll go down and there may be one or two ribs left at the end here, or sometimes it's pretty easy to just take that whole plate off.
The ribs are definitely something that there's a lot of opinions about as to whether they're a wonderful part to eat or something to be left out in the woods. That's what
Right.
happened for many, many years, is they were left out in the woods.
And you got your work cut out for you if you want to use this for trim. If you got the time, I say that's great. And let's use as much of the animal as we can. But this is what we call the spare ribs. You can take a cleaver or a saw and just clean up this part of it. And as well as clean up some of this fat on the outside. And then you got something that's going to be a pretty good candidate for your barbecue, I'd say.
Okay,
Where are we going next, Mark?
we're going to the neck,
Down to the neck. All
down
right,
to the neck.
here we go.
Okay.
All right. With the neck meat hanging like this, I obviously would prefer this deer to be hanging up about 4 feet higher. So since we already have some neck meat trimmed out, I'm just going to show where I like to go in. If you look on the inside here, starting at about the 3rd rib, that's a good place to start. And that's also where you're going to get the tail or the top of your back straps. So I'll actually just look here. 1, 2, 3, and you can cut out that way and we'll cut up to the neck. And then slowly start to peel it down. And as you peel it, you can make your cut at the bottom and be able to just fold it up as you peel it off. And that's as much neck cutting I'm going to do on my knees tonight.
Got a neck run out?
Yeah, let's take a look at that neck roll.
Okay,
All right.
there we go.
So this is the neck we took off earlier. It's been all cleaned up. That's the serratus ventralis for all you Latin lovers out there, which is also called the Denver steak on beef these days. We've cleaned this up of blood clots, cleaned the majority of the fat off of it. And at this point, it's a great cut for pot roast or for stew meat, as well as just using for trim for grind or for jerky. We could talk about cool things you can do with the neck for a long time, but let's talk about some other parts of this deer.
I do like the neck meat. John Whitfley, you and I were talking about our friend John today, who wrote the book Venison cookbook. If you are looking for good recipes, that's one of the good cookbooks out there. And he's got a venison neck, like a split pea soup,
Nice.
which is awesome. So that's another idea what you could do with the neck. Matt, questions?
Yeah, let's see. Let's see, we're probably gonna talk about the hams later, correct?
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit. Yep.
What is the best way to minimize hair and fur on the meat when gutting and skinning the animal?
I think one of the things that's important is not cutting when we were skinning earlier, is coming with the blade up underneath and out, not out from the top. And so that starts all the way when you're field dressing your deer. You're going to want to come up underneath the sternum and up through when you're gutting out the deer, and always cut up. Never cut on top of the hair. That's definitely one thing. And then I think another aspect of it, like we were talking about, is when you make these circular cuts at the top and you're going to start working down, just always pulling the skin away and out, so you got hair on hair, and that will minimize it to a certain extent.
Yeah, and if you're you're able to have your deer well anchored and you have someone helping you, you can take your time and really make sure that there isn't any hair on it. You know, people bring up a question of like, oh, can you rinse it off? And there's different schools of thought there where I say that's fine if it's your deer. I mean, I don't think there's a real health problem with rinsing with cold water if you're going to be packaging and freezing this product immediately. All right.
Okay.
Back straps.
Let's see. We've got our notes here just to make sure we don't miss anything. Yeah, back straps.
Here we go.
Here we go. The world famous back strap.
Yeah. So we're going to do two different approaches. The first one is going to be removing the back strap from the sirloin all the way down to the neck. And the other one is going to be doing a two-pronged approach that involves some rack and bone-in chops.
So you may have heard about back straps, maybe you haven't, but I mean, this is considered by many a premium cut.
At the longissimus dorsi is the backstrap muscle that goes from the pelvic bone all the way down to the neck. If this was raised a little bit higher and we had all the time in the world, it's nice to use gravity as your friend and remove Silverskin while it's hanging. I'm not going to go and do all of that here, but it is like a fine opportunity to remove stuff you know you're not gonna need.
Gonna do an over the shoulder shot.
So one example would be to just do this, and you can maybe play a little game with yourself and see how long of a strip of back fat you can cut. But so you can see where the tailbone comes down and where the legs meet the loin here. And I'm going to go up about right here and cut in. And then follow the spine all the way down.
So this is where, again, you're following along that spine. And we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, but you want to not cut into that spine, just given the risks of chronic wasting disease. Turn there. Yeah, that works. So this hunk of meat is basically bordered by the spine, and notice how he's going over the knuckles of the spine there.
Yep. Yeah, every inch or so there's a node that sticks out, and you can just totally bypass those and leave a little more meat on the bone if you want, or you could take a lot more time than I just did and make it extra clean. It's worth pointing out here that there are feather bones that stick out underneath the loin, below the ribs, and then we're going to navigate around where the ribs come in, closer up towards the neck.
Real quick, we did cut out the tenderloins prior, which the location of the tenderloins is right along the spine back there below the ribs. And so, you know, you got the spine bordering one end of the back strap, and then now he's working down the ribs. And this is a relatively easy cut too, once you get the feel for it. I think this is one of the most rewarding cuts you make when you're butchering a deer. In my mind, you can just feel this enormous chunk of wonderful meat coming off.
And I had already made that cut where the neck was going to come off. So picture a deer with no neck meat on there, and that's how this was going to be removed. I'll comment that that's not my cleanest backstrap removal, but know that I'm capable of a much cleaner job.
And that's where, so if we can hold that up, that's something, that's a a lot of times you'll see people with trophy shots nowadays of the backstrap.
Yep.
And so that's where that is coming from. But, even like Brian was saying, okay, we're doing this really quick. And so there's a little bit of meat left on there. That meat, you're going to want to pull out of there with a knife. I know some people will even use like a spoon to
Yep.
just get every little last bit of that scrap out of there.
And you can follow this chain, the chain muscle a little bit more closely too.
So we'll clean it up, and that's something that we're gonna be doing all night long, right, Renell? Right, Eric? Okay.
Let's talk about the second approach for our back straps. And we're gonna take the boneless loin section as one loin, and then take the rib section of the loin or back straps off as a rack of ribs. We've talked about being sensitive to the spine and not getting into the spinal column because of chronic wasting disease. And I find that this is a safe way to do it, and you get to use a hatchet, which is pretty cool. You can see where this last rib is, and I would just cut all the way towards the spine. There, and I would remove this back strap the same way I removed the entire portion here, and then I'll be left with a rack, which I'll count up 1, 2, 3, so 3 or 4, and cut in. Can you hand me that hatchet, please? And from this point, the ribs are connected. You can see they connect to the spine.
A little bit louder.
Ribs connect to the spine here. This part, there's a little bit of muscle covering it as you get closer to the loin. Or the sirloin. But I like to just tap it.
You could use a cleaver. The small axe actually works better, just to get through those ribs.
And you'll slowly be able to break this off and peel it out. As you take a first pass at each of these ribs, I would go back out and trim all of the loin meat down to the spine. And so the only part anchoring it on is the where the rib joins the spine. Now here's the fun part. You don't get to watch me hack at this standing or on my knees. We're just going to show you what a bone-in rack looks like once we've done this this axe work.
Okay, well, now the other butcher is bringing them out to. This is something I will say when Brian and I did this last year. So we've done butchering clinics in person and in different ways for the last few years. Last year when Brian and I were doing some video work, he did these and I was just so impressed how beautiful they are.
Right. This is what it can look like after you've removed the ribs. As you can see, was able to cleanly cut through those after I had broken part of the bone there with the axe, and being able to pull it out, you can pop that out and leave the bone in and have a Frenched rack, or you can just cut it into single Frenched chops or steaks. And that's just something that's going to elevate your venison game a little bit. There's not a lot of Frenched racks of venison out there.
So the original backstrap,
Right.
and having some fun with it over here.
And these are the loin roasts or backstrap roasts. This is a great way to cook backstrap, in my opinion. I like to cook it to rare in the middle. So when you have a roast like this, you can do it in the oven. You can do it on a grill. I like to do it in a cast iron pan and throw a bunch of butter and herbs and garlic in and get a nice crust on all of it. And then you can have a nice rare center. It's good eating.
It is good eating.
All right.
Okay, so next we're gonna go down to the legs, down to the hind legs. So hopefully you guys could stay with us a little bit. We're at about 10 to 7 Central Time right now. A little bit more to go here and discussion. And that's, as you can see, that's why we're scrambling to get everything done within the time period.
Cool. Yeah, I want to talk about the legs. It's definitely the meatiest portion of the animal. There's a lot you can do here. There are the largest muscles without any Silverskin and connective tissue. So this is where you want to be going for to make your jerky, as well as roasts and all the bountiful trim for whatever products you're making. An easy way to do this would be to remove the spine, or if you had 2 separate anchors, you would be able to take these legs apart and have them swing freely and independently. The way that this is anchored with a single gambrel would be a little bit more difficult to do that. We've taken a, where's our leg?
Yeah, but I did.
We got a lot of meat sitting around here, trying to get each of the parts.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I saw that was only one, and I thought, oh.
All right. So something that I want to show tonight is how to take the leg off the pelvic bone. And so you can see here, this is the pelvis here with one leg on. We've already removed one leg and cleaned it up. It's a pretty simple approach. It is a little bit easier doing it on the table. If you had both legs here, you could be laying them out, and it would be a pretty simple. It's a pretty simple process. You're going to just follow along the pelvic bone and slowly open up until you reach that ball joint. You can see here, there's a little tendon in the middle, and you just scoop it out and open it up like this. Or take the pelvic bone off completely.
So right around that socket.
Yep, you can see how that's coming off. And I'm just following the bone here. So take this, please. Thanks. With the legs, you're going to have a top round, bottom round, eye round, and a knuckle, and then a shank. The top round is the biggest muscle. And we got some sirloin here. Top round, the way to remember where the top round is if the animal is cut in half and falls, it's going to be on top. It's also the muscle that is drying out on the inside of the animal. And it's the muscle that I like to remove first. You can see that it tapers down towards the shank. And then there is a seam here that you can follow. But the easiest way to do this is to follow from the shank down to the ball joint. And there's a couple different muscles here that you don't have to pay close attention to, as long as you're following that bone.
It's like Brian was saying, following the seams. The thing about, these hindquarters, there are different ways you can do it. I've seen butchers at different times over the years take more of a traditional butcher approach of sawing through and making big steaks. But the reality is just doing a French style of seam butchery, as it's called, where you just let the major muscle groups do the work.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like you could do this just with your hands.
Right.
So we have the top round, it's slowly coming off. And as you get in there, you can see that it'll open up to the tubular muscle, which is the eye of round. So we'll have big top round, we'll cut away, and then we'll have the eye round. It really separates pretty easily. And then the bottom round. We cut into this leg a little bit. The muscle that's on the front, which is where the kneecap is commonly called the knuckle. That's what I called it anyway. I believe that there are some different names. What's the? I know what's the one? What do you call it?
Tip.
Oh yeah, tip, sirloin tip.
Yes.
Beef, they make baseball steaks. There's a couple different ways you can break that down. I like to just kind of go straight from the knee here and cut below the joint and try and follow the bone as cleanly as I can. There's this piece that's hanging off the front is actually the tri-tip. We have our sirloin tip, eye round, top round, bottom round, and then our shank. For our shank, I like to take where the tendon was and open that up and use this cut for trim. When you're removing this part off the leg, there is just a very conical shape of the shank that you can easily follow when you're removing this. So we're going to talk about shanks. We're going to talk about more of the leg muscles cleaned up. I want to move this stuff over, and then we're going to show some of the sexier already trimmed pieces. Stack that up there. Cool. All right. You want to set that here? Thanks. We're going to look at trimmed up. This is the top round, our eye round, the bottom round, and our knuckle. Where's the sirloin, guys? We're missing a part.
So this is where, to those questions earlier, a little bit of hair on there. We're moving quickly here, obviously, but I'm making sure I'm pulling up the hair off at each stage of the game.
We found it.
Found it, all right.
So this cut was not on the leg I just broke down. So I'm going to point out where that is on the animal here. Not that. Ooh, that one's not looking so good either. So we have where the tail goes straight across. This triangular piece is the sirloin. And there's really a couple different muscles here. Let's see, how's that? Let's put it on the other side, actually. There we go. And this would be the tri-tip, the culotte or picanha, if we're talking beef, and then the top sirloin here. And I think this is a pretty underestimated cut on venison. If you were going to do a pot roast or something, to like a slow braise, it's a great cut. It's also something where you can seam out all the individual cuts and use that either for jerky or for trim. And with our knuckle, you can all just cut through the middle here to give you an idea of what you're dealing with. There's a couple different muscles, and you're able to, this is a good jerky candidate. It's kind of a tough muscle. It's not that great of a roast. Don't let anyone tell you that it's a great roast. I would use it. I like to use it for jerky or for trim. The bottom round is also like a great candidate for jerky. It's thicker muscle fibers, also good braised and cubed up because of the thick fibers. It's just a great texture for something that's slow cooked. I'd say about the same with the eye of round here. With the top round, I think this is a great roast. If you're going to cook something slow and wanted to have a big feast, I would recommend using the top round, or even more of these leg muscles still joined together. But also, this is the most common cut used for jerky, and you can see why, where you can get nice, clean, big strips. And you know, there's nothing like having a bag of venison jerky where every piece is about the size of a penny. You can have some like real nice jerky pieces here if you're using the top round. All right,
Okay, I think we got a question, Matt.
Yeah, somebody was asking about the tri-tip. You had mentioned it before. They said they really like that cut. Can you go over kind of where you can find that again?
Yeah, so the tri-tip is this muscle right here. The sharpest tip of the tri-tip is actually going up towards the kneecap. And you don't mind holding this, I can just show right on this. So this is what is our sirloin cut. And you can see right here that this is the tri-tip, the triangular cut. And if you want to be really careful, you can even start to just take it off from the leg. And you can see that the classic tri-tip texture of these tender but sort of large muscle fibers. There's the one point of the tri-tip, and then other points here and here. I think that's a good enough description.
That's a good description. I like it. Okay.
Let's talk about shanks.
Yeah. Shanks.
You see this more and more now with people cooking venison shanks. I think it's awesome. Also, buco is a term that's thrown out a lot. It's great in an instant pot or pressure cooker, or just letting it cook all day. You can use beer, you can use stock, red wine, or any vegetables and herbs you have laying around.
Want to remind people where the shanks.
Yep. So there are 4 shanks, which are on the shoulder, the arms that we removed first. And then there are the hind shanks, which if we were going to remove these, we would take this off and cut. We're going to cut the hide up a little bit further, and it's this long piece right here. Let's take a look. Bring some shanks. Yeah. Cool. Let's bring those over. Looking at the shank again, something worth noting: if you're in the field, you're not going to have like a big saw with you. You're gonna be breaking at the joints. That can be a little bit messy when you have to do it. I'd say do it. but it's great to have a saw and get these clean cuts. And for both ends of the shank, you can use a saw and cut through the meat on one side. Actually, even more helpful if there's more meat left on here. But just using a hand saw, you can get a nice. I worked at a butcher shop for 2 years that didn't let me get a bandsaw, and so I learned how to use a meat saw rather proficiently. And a couple more words about a meat saw is I like to have the teeth facing outwards, and that way, if I'm using the weight of the saw to cut downwards, and then I'm pulling it back up and only cutting on the downstroke, and pretty much just using the weight of the saw, not putting too much force behind it. So that's one way to cut the shanks. And you can cut them into these nice French shanks, where you can, these are the hind shanks here, and you can have, you can braise these laid down in your pot and bring them to the table, standing tall, or you can take shanks and I like to pre-tie them and then cut them in between the strings, and you get the more classic ossobuco cut. And you can do these with the foreshank and the hind shank. I like the hind shank for like the tall whole French shank. But yeah, I'd say don't waste your shank meat. Like, do it, braise it.
So yeah, so I mean, those would be the two things. Ossobuco, great way to do it, slow cooking it, or like you said, Instapot we were talking about earlier, fairly short cook time.
Right.
Or the alternative would be cutting it up and either going into the grind pile or stew meat possibly, right?
Yep, it's tougher meat. If you're gonna grind it, you're gonna want sharp blades, or be able to just grind it with a coarse grind. I can't help, but I'm gonna talk more about grinding. You can grind if you have, it's really helpful to have a large plate with big holes in it and do all your grind through there. And if you're gonna grind into a finer grind for sausage, grind through the big plate first, chill your meat, and then grind it through the smaller plate. Otherwise, you're just forcing all this meat through these tiny holes, and you're tearing apart all the proteins, and people end up wondering why their sausage has horrible texture. That's one contributing factor. All right, we're over an hour, right? That went pretty fast.
We're just over an hour, but just the last piece, because I know people will ask if we don't want to address it. We're not going to go into detail, but packaging it up, how do you package it? If you are serious about hunting, if you are going to be processing at least hopefully one animal a year, doing freezer paper with one of these holders where it's a coated paper can be great. Some people like to double up and do plastic wrap inside and then do a freezer paper. Also of help is one of these freezer tape dispensers, because then you just get a system going of bringing the paper out, putting the meat in, tape it up, and mark it, obviously with a Sharpie. Food saver, or air vacuum. You could do it. It would be a lot of work. I don't know many people who vacuum seal their venison. But that's an option. Well, I guess you guys do. Okay, much better man than I am.
This is what you should do. Go in with all your friends and get a really good vacuum sealer. A Torre mini pack. They have a Bosch pump, and that thing will last for 30 years.
There you go. There you go. So different perspective on it.
It costs $5 grand.
There you go.
But it's worth it.
So we were talking, let's see, I'm trying to think if there was anything else we missed. Matt, are there any other questions that have come up?
Yeah, there's a few questions. Are we in the question answer section?
Yeah, why don't we, we're 10 minutes over. I wanted to try to keep it to an hour. Hopefully You guys appreciate how much work Brian put into this for us to be able to just rapid fire go through the process. But yeah, let's answer some questions, and then maybe if there's anything else we want to address, or if anybody in the room has questions. But
Yeah.
what do you got, Matt?
First one, what are the differences between butchering and processing a deer right away versus refrigerating for a day or two and then processing?
Well, it's rigor mortis, which is where the muscles seize up after death. And I don't remember exactly how long.
It's about a day or two, max.
But so I'm a butcher by trade, and I've worked with butchers from all around. And I know that in Argentina, they slaughter beef and butcher it right as it's what's called a hot butcher. And you just peel all the muscles off right after slaughter. And then in the States, you kill and chill and then age it and break it down. I just butchered a mule deer in Montana a couple weeks ago, where we were leaving the next day, and we skinned it and butchered it hot. And it was the first time I'd ever done that. Everything turned out great. So I think there are advantages to dry aging and letting your animal cool, and you get like this controlled rancidity process of protein breakdown with the dry aging, and the meat's just going to be a little bit more tender, and some people prefer that flavor after it's been dry aged.
I think I've seen, where either I've quartered out, never fully butchered an animal right away while it's still warm, but then waiting till after rigor mortis. So I think you don't want to do it during rigor mortis, but yeah, I think a lot of different ways to do it.
So the next question has to do with grinding the meats. He says they prefer to add about 7 to 10% beef fat to the burger meat, and then they say the meat is chilled before grinding. But he says the barrel of the grinder plugs with the beef fat. Do you have any tips for them?
Use pork fat. I happen to sell pork fat for venison sausage making.
We'll put a link for everybody.
Beef fat has a higher rendering temperature. It's just a harder, denser, more saturated and waxy fat. And everyone has trouble with it in their grinders, including giant grinders that can grind 1,000 pounds at a time. It's just a really tough situation. Hand chopping it and having it in as small pieces as you can get, and blending it with your venison is a smart way to do that. It does just gum up and get very waxy, especially while it's cold. But again, I think pork fat is a better candidate. It has a more mild flavor and doesn't have the same textural issues that beef fat can have in the grind.
I do think pork fat is superior to beef fat, and I'll do a plug for you. So if you go to WikerAcres.com, we'll put a link out to everybody. But there is a hunter's grinding kit including where they send back fat, some bacon, and some other things. And I do think for venison, which is such a lean cut,
right,
it's a perfect marriage of the fatty pork with the venison. So,
yeah, and I think that people add beef or add pork to their venison grind, and I always say, like, just add the fat. Like, you've got the flavor, you've got the muscle from your venison. Like, why do you want to dilute that? So I say just add pork fat, and in some instances, but you can add bacon.
Do you have a preferred ratio of pork fat for the ground venison used to make burger or breakfast sausage?
For sausage, you can go a little bit higher with that ratio. I do anywhere from 70 to 75% lean, with the rest being pork fat. I'm gonna try and do some math. I think that's 25 to 20% pork fat. Don't hold me to that. And then for burgers, a little bit leaner is fine. And in fact, I often like just cooking venison burgers as just pure lean ground venison in a cast iron skillet and using a lot of butter.
Butter and bacon.
Right.
You can never go wrong with those, right? any other questions, man?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, somebody's asking if you have a perspective on grass-fed versus grain-fed.
We're talking deer. I know the deer that just eat grass and bark up where our hunting camp is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan doesn't generally taste as good as the corn-fed deer down south. But regarding beef, the best beef I've ever had is 100% grass-fed beef. I think it's a very difficult thing to do that requires a lot of good genetics, good pasture, and like year-round attention, especially in colder climates where you have to change the diet over to hay that you're storing. And my one objection to grain-fed and corn-fed beef is just the feedlot style of raising those animals is so horrible for the environment and not exactly a humane way to raise livestock. So I'm not going to go and say I fully prefer grass-fed beef. I think it's a hard thing to accomplish well, but it certainly has some better health benefits, just that it's more lean.
All right, last one has to do with the video and if people are able to watch it after tonight.
Yeah, so we'll send a link out so people can watch it for a period of time, probably a couple weeks after, in case there are some things that you really wanted to review from tonight. And we'll do some other things in the future. If you guys are interested in maybe Brian and I doing a sit down on specifics of something,
Yeah.
let us know. Shoot an email to info@modcarn.com. Also, make sure you sign up for the Jeb Taylor knife giveaway. Also, stay tuned for January, February, we'll be doing a 3-part waterfowl hunting series through partnership with the SEI Foundation. Joel Bryce from Delta Waterfowl and several others will be part of that. And so that's going to be another fun series that's coming up.
Awesome.
But yeah, thanks so much, Brian, for
Yep.
being here and being in the garage.
This was fun.
More lint rolling of the hair.
It's the warmest workplace I've been in all week because I spend a lot of my day in the freezer.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah.